What's up? What's up? Waking up over here. It's a beautiful day, and I'm ready to talk about Gibraltar. Yes, it's like dedication to the game. That's right, boys.
Off. So we're going to be working on that in the EQ. But welcome to the show. Welcome to the live stream. We thanks for showing up for those of you in EU especially and early risers on the Pacific Coast right before your work shifts this week. We're going to be trying to bridge the gap on 3 topics today, which is a little ambitious for what time we're starting on my end as well as Tyler's because he's got class and Andres has got a full day of editing, I'm sure, as well as schoolwork too. So let's try to start right into it. Right at the top here, just introduce our guest. Shockmaster is a longtime community member from pretty much the first season of Overwatch. He's been in our Discord, interacting with our community, and started out as what he called in the pre-show as a mere mortal, just like another player who hasn't really played a whole lot of FPSs and has recently hit top 500 within the last month. So super, super hype there. We're really excited to have him here and talk through a Gibraltar guide as the mainstay thing for the map guide. But before we start, we should start off with a little bit of background on him, hearing things from his side. So Andres and I will probably tag team a quick question and answer thing with Shock. But Shock, just tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of like you trying to break into affiliate streaming right now with doing VOD reviews mixed in with top level gameplay, and also a little bit of how you've gotten into Open Division with regards to your schooling.
Well, yeah. So I am a 4300 peak now, flex player. Although I do primarily focus on projectile DPS, and I have been playing Overwatch since the very beginning. Not like super like closed beta or anything, but I started playing since start of season one, and even before season one was out. And I started from platinum, and yeah, and I also play for a college team here in Oregon, which is sweet.
Yeah,
Besides
Awesome.
Overwatch.
Shock is a great testimony of how far you can get in this game when you put in the time, when you sit down and you try to learn and you improve yourself. We've known Shock for a very long time. Like Rob said, he's been part of the community almost since the beginning. And it's been amazing just watching him improve and improve. And at one point, we were kind of like toe to toe. And then eventually, he just started getting better and better. And we're all like, how much better is he going to get? And now
You're just
he
sitting on the docks watching the ship go. You're like, Godspeed, sir.
now he's at top 500 and going into open division, which is super super awesome. It's been awesome watching this guy's journey. Do you want to speak a little bit to that, Chuck? Because you have been very dedicated to learning this game. You've been nonstop playing different heroes, mastering them. Can you go a little bit through your process of how you like learning this game and playing it?
Yeah, well, so when I first hit Masters in season three, I got an alt account, and like I knew from like the beginning, I always really wanted to be a DPS main, but I felt like I was always better off playing support or tank anyways. So I was constantly pursuing that like in the background while I was playing on like my main account, but I would always have this alt account that was a DPS account, and I would try to like keep that account around my main account so that I could have like a buffer account, so to say, but also be playing DPS at the same time. And if I ever wanted to
Mm.
focus on a hero, I would just play that hero like almost like exclusively. Not to the like I would one trick it to the point where like I was getting better at the hero, but if I felt that I absolutely needed to switch, then I would do that.
Right,
sort
you
of
were not
thing.
trying to be like
Yeah,
malicious, just like I'm just gonna play this
yeah,
hero, but it was
but
more like what
yeah,
you were trying to focus on practicing at the time.
indeed.
Yeah, it's
And I
hero mastery.
pretty much almost never took a season off either. Like I really just like played the game and played it like with a purpose too.
And I think that's a
Now,
big factor that a lot of people don't keep in mind, right? How much
mhm.
time it actually takes to get this good. And it's a saying that gets thrown a lot, but hard work beats talent. If talent doesn't work hard, right? And I think that's something a lot of people have to realize. Like top 500 and top professionals were not like born that way. They're not like these god tier people that are just like playing way above you. A lot of them were just like you guys in gold, in plat, sometimes in silver, that just
Mm.
really put in the time. Another person that comes to mind is guys like XQC. When he started, he was just like Shock in platinum, not super good at the game. And they've gotten so far because of the time and dedication that they've put into
Mhm.
it. So I don't know. I think it's a great example and something to keep in mind. Shock is a great example of that.
Now, I wanted to like ask two things real quick. The one thing was like, Shock, when you first started playing, like everyone, you kind of gravitated towards the fun stuff, right? And then like kind of once the honeymoon stage of playing the game kind of settled, what did you really start transitioning into? Because I know that you kind of went through a couple phases through climbing, right? You're like, okay, I'm trying to this out, and this is just hitting a wall. And so I made a second account, and I'm just playing this. And then you went back to your main, and you're like, I'm gonna try this. And so you're very much in this toying stage for a while. So can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, so like in season 1 through pretty much like for about 4 seasons, I was a Zenyatta main, and I was even a Zenyatta main back when Zenyatta had 150 HP, and his transcendence didn't give him movement abilities, which was a
He's
hilarious
super
thing because it
slow.
was literally he was the least meta hero in the game. And
Yeah,
at the
you.
start, I was just like, well, I just really enjoy this guy, and I want to get play of the games with him because his highlight intros are really cool. So I just want to play this guy, and I but then as I like started getting bored of the hero because I like pretty much like exclusively played him for about 3 seasons almost, I started
Mm-hmm.
being like, okay, well, DPS is kind of more of my thing, so I try it out. I tried out like Tracer and Genji, but my Tracer started to not really like perfectly hit everything, so I was trying out Widow, and my Widow went well for a while. And then in season 5, I kind of discovered my love for Hanzo and projectile heroes in general. And so I started playing that. And what ended up starting that was my alt account actually hit a career high for me, playing almost exclusively Hanzo. And I was like, well, if I can do that on an alt account, then maybe I can incorporate that more on my main. So I started playing
Mm.
Hanzo more with my Zenyatta, with my Tracer, with my Widow, and then just kind of built more heroes into my pool as I went on in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And something that I noticed
And
about Overwatch is once you start getting the hang of how like the physics of the game work, especially after you've been playing a while, some of those skills translate a lot, right? Like once you start getting like the timing of Zenyatta's projectiles, translating into Hanzo's arrows or even Mei's alternate fire is not like that much different. It's just a change of speed slightly, but it gets easier to adjust as soon as you get good at one. Mei's another character you got really into. I don't know if it's recently or if you've been playing her a lot lately, but I've noticed you've been playing her a lot too.
Mm-hmm. Well, in season 2, I kind of played her like a ton. Like she was my second most played hero, just because like I really enjoyed her. And she's always just been like that kind of that niche pick for me. Like I feel like just my brain just works really well for me. Like I feel like I know her wall really well. I just know her. I think I know her projectile the best out of all of the heroes, but it's kind of like it's an inconsistent projectile because it has like a cast time on it,
Right.
which makes it really interesting. Uh, but it's definitely my best projectile, I would say. Just I don't know why. It's just like it's just gonna
Sometimes
work.
it just clicks, right?
Yeah. Sometimes it just clicks.
All right. Well, I would love to keep chatting about this, to be honest, but we do have a lot of bases to cover, and Shock has been doing a lot of like back end stuff to help us out with this hero guide. So let's go through a quick housekeeping announcements, and we'll get right into our Gibraltar thing here. So right at the top, we have game night is actually tonight, November the 30th. Starts when people start showing up. We had a couple questions in the email for when does it start? How do I get involved? Just the only things that are required are join the Discord and find your platform. If people are online, if people are in the Discord and trying to run it, then it will happen. And if you are an EU or NA, we are not large enough of a community to have enough people in EU, but all of those on EU are welcome to join the NA game night. It does start around, I think, right after lunchtime on Eastern time, or dinner time Eastern time, around 6:30. And then that's when the trickle begins. And this is the best kind of trickle. This is not your Overwatch time trickle, okay? This is where people start showing up to the party, and the party don't stop until people start like actually leaving in swaths, which takes a long time. It's like 3 a.m. on Pacific time is when that starts pretty much.
Yeah, it goes on for quite a while. Also, great
Now,
opportunity to play against our guest today. If you guys don't believe if he's good or not, you can test it out yourselves on the game night.
Yeah, come smash me in some 1v1s.
Yeah, have fun with that. Now, I will give a word to the wise. This month, there will be a good chunk of us on the admin team that will not be participating. I being one of them, as well as I believe Yan is also in Japan and traveling home. He's on the other end of the country, so we weren't able to meet up. And then Switch is also not going to be able to make it. But that being said, we do have some game night lobby hosts that can help you out, and you can join there. We also have Top Score Solutions back again with sponsorship, helping us out with giving you guys a good foot in the door with regards to esports. If you're looking to be getting into coaching or team organization or app and service development, or even just subscriber boosting base, or just some esports help, you can find him on topscoresolutions.com, Twitter at Topscore Esports, and you can find him in the Discord there and get the links. He goes by I Need Peeling. But special thanks again to Ben. Thanks so much for sponsoring this show. We also have Omnic Meta. Switch, as we mentioned, who comes to the game nights occasionally. He is still doing stats and is currently working them out to flex around the new Hero Ash integrated. So he's been working on a couple bug fixing things before he runs back into going through more articles. I'm sure he's going to have a 2-month lag time and then go straight into kind of the analysis of what's been going on with Ash and her impact in the meta. So look for that. And we have our Humble Bundle link. You can look for our affiliate link by typing !humble in the chat. And the last is a note on Ash's scope. If you need some help with the calculator, remember she has a slightly different scope than On and Widowmaker, and you can find that in the show notes below. All right, let's talk about Gibraltar, boys and girls. Let's talk Winston. Let's talk Athena's place of destruction, I guess you could say, around the ships and sending people to space. Shock, Andres, let's take it away. So we're gonna start with general tips. So this is basically like how you're approaching team composition. What are some considerations? How do you play payload? Like what is your number one type of like mindset that you need to be going into the back of your head? And then last, what is kind of like the general basics of kind of like approach? We're not even really getting into this yet. We're like, okay, this is payload, this is Gibraltar. I'm at every rank. What am I considering here? So Shock, take us in that kind of mind.
Right. So Gibraltar historically just kind of tends to be a dive map. Even in the midst of goats, this is often played as a dive map, and that is mostly just so that your main goal in this map is just to take advantage of all the high ground. There's high ground like all around the map. Even like when you start and spawn, there's a high ground spawn. There's a catwalk right at the start. There's high ground to the left, and there's like connectors that make it all the way to where the defense likes to stand near the blue box, and just the straightaway high ground and all that. Andres, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree that Gibraltar is one of those maps that really favors teams that can take advantage of just taking the vantage point. Heroes like Reinhardt and Zarya, which are great in the meta right now, and people love picking them, tend to struggle in this map quite a bit, just because the high ground points in this map are so good. Many of them can overlook the entire point to the point where if you don't deal with DPS or threats that are in those points, your team just becomes shooting ducks trying to push a payload. And it's something that I've been trying to integrate into my play lately and try to incentivize other teams or my teammates to do it, especially maps like this one or Dorado, which are payload maps that have a lot of high ground. It is you have to prioritize the map over the payload. You have to win the map, you have to win the high ground, and then worry about pushing the payload because I see too many teams making the mistake of prioritizing the payload, and then you have the whole team just huddling in the low ground, and then they're just shooting ducks. It's a shooting gallery against them. Then
It
they
is a
get to the
valley.
choke, and like they can't even get past it. It's just bombarding from all the sides. So I definitely agree. Like being able to have a team that can get to the high ground fast, like a Winston, like a Diva, Genji, Hanzo is great. Widowmaker is great. Pharah can work in this map. Hammond is an excellent choice, for example. Any of these heroes that can just be like, ooh, I see somebody up top, let me use a cooldown and I'm there in like 2 seconds is fantastic. Heroes like Zarya, like McCree, like Reinhardt can be okay in this map, but if the enemy is abusing this weakness from you, you're gonna have a really hard time. Reinhardt has no easy way to go up top in Gibraltar. It takes him like 2 hours to go up the stairs and around, and once he gets there, the fight has moved somewhere else. So, I that's the way I see this map. What do you think of that?
Yeah, well, I do want to start off with first point here now, and I think the first big mistake that a lot of people on this map, and you kind of touched on this already, is the first tunnel, and I've seen a lot of teams really like to like stack on the payload in the tunnel, but I feel like what a lot of teams should be doing is leave an off tank, like maybe a Winston or like off or a main tank, like a Winston or a Diva, that something that has mobility, something that can maybe get back easily if he needs to. I like to leave one of those on the cart, and then everyone else, including like healers and stuff, I like to
Mm-hmm.
have them all come up the stairs from attacker's perspective, and come up to blue box or up to the catwalk above the tunnel, just
Mm-hmm.
to get some advantage because the defenders are gonna want to sit on the catwalk that's like way on the back end of of the point, and they're going to have a lot of space if we don't have like a if the attacker's team doesn't have a position to jump
Mm-hmm.
them easily. So yeah,
Yeah, I
And
think
there's
that.
two routes to get up there too, right? We have
yeah,
two stairwells, and technically there's a third one if you can kind of go in that side room where there's a health pack right outside
yeah,
the entrance. So you have the two stairwells right there, and then you have the back stairwell, which is by the um kind of what the space, I don't know, satellite sphere looks like in the big back end. You can kind of go up, and there's like an L bracket staircase there that you can get boofed off the map on the ledge. So those are the three approaches you have at your arsenals. And just communicate with your team. If you're a tank, especially, try to go like Shock's saying, like run your divas, run your Winstons, kind of babysit for a little bit. Make sure you can get your supports where they need to be, and then you can do what you need to do.
I was gonna say that first point is a great example of why high ground in this map is so important. A mistake that I see lower tier people do a lot in this map is thinking that they all have to go down with the payload into the tunnel and then back out all as a team, and that is like a defender's dream, right? Like if all of the enemy team who is attacking is down below the tunnel with a payload, you have all the high ground to yourself. You can just spam the hell out of that tunnel. Your Zenyatta is throwing orbs, your Junkrat is throwing um, freaking bombs into it. Anyone who can do AoE damage can throw something into it, like Ash, that is now in the game, can throw her dynamite in there and get like 6 people with her thing. It's just too good for the defenders team at that point. And also coming out of the tunnel, once you're like in the lowest point, you have to go up the ramp, which puts you in the worst position in the world because you have people shooting at you probably from the front of the defenders, and then you have also people shooting at you from above, and it's like 2 angles that you can never cover at the same time unless you have like a Winston shield, but that's gonna get shredded super fast when people are spamming you down there. So what Shock said, prioritizing getting your team to the high ground and maybe leaving one person, that's all you need at this point to carry the cart slowly down there while your team is able to gain control of high ground, put pressure on the defender's team to fall all the way back. Then that one person carrying the payload has such an easier time and can do it by themselves pretty much.
Yep. I do also want to say Gibraltar point A defense is the point that I have full held the most out of like almost every map. And that is specifically because of people who do that on offense. They go through the tunnel, and I'm just sitting here like I'm a Doomfist, and I'll just like sit up behind blue box, and when I see people file in like that, I'm hitting a massive seismic, and I'm uppercutting them, and I'm getting like freaking 600 damage from that. Like,
yeah, because you hit like 4
like,
people.
Yeah,
just
there's
stacking up,
there's
right?
like no way like you're gonna get out of there.
There's so many abilities that can get so much value from that position because all of the enemy team will be huddled up from below. So an Ana grenade,
You're just turning it into a funnel.
right?
And then it arbitrarily creates a secondary high ground because you're going down into a valley.
Yeah, you get like
you
almost
have
like
2
3
high grounds, so
stories.
you're at like double disadvantage to like deal with people.
It's so hard to shoot at people from when you're down there. You don't have any good angles. Well, they have the perfect angles on you. Just like
It's so bad.
Gravitons, Junkrat
is
tires,
definitely
you
over.
know.
It's even just Junkrat, which is not even like necessarily favored in this map. He's just like, I'm just gonna chuck grenades in there, you know, and just keep people at bay.
Junk can be an amazing hero in this map as long as they're playing ground teams. If the enemy team
Yeah.
is not taking advantage of the vertical mobility in this map, Junk is a great choice because Junk can actually take advantage of the vertical mobility. He gets a little less effective once the team gets a lot of mobility, though.
So, okay, let's go back to the high ground now. So we're attacking and we're there. Now what? What are we going to do? Like, what's our next approach? Maybe we win the team fight. Maybe we lose the team fight. How do we go about breaking the defense? Because I know that lower tier players or mid tier players run into the cheese, right? You've run the whole map even twice, and people are setting up like double barriers with Bastion. You've got super mobile comps or just CCing you out of the map. I mean, what do we do?
Well, there is actually a strategy that I see a lot of people at my tier take advantage of, and it's actually like not too hard to do either. So there's a mega health pack in server room on it's like straight away from the defender spawn, and there's actually a hallway that you can take that takes you to the high ground next to the defenders area, and you can actually just like take half your team there and just full flank. And if anyone is like a Widowmaker on the defense or anyone like that that's taking advantage of the defenders high ground, you can just like roll them and get them off or kill them, and then you get another angle if they do end up running a bunker comp like an Orisa or even just Ryan Zarya sort of thing. You can get that extra angle and break the defense by putting some long range DPS up there.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about from the defender's point of view? How do you want to maybe uphold that position, and when do you drop down? I know that that's something that a lot of teams, especially when I was climbing to Diamond for the first time, like I got a lot of Gibraltar maps for whatever reason, and my teams are always just like, what do we do? Like, when do we drop? Are we going to go? Or are we half going to go? Or are we just going to have somebody contest? You know, what do we do here?
Well, assuming you're running a dive composition, I like an off tank sitting with dive DPS up there, and then have a main tank that can contest point every once in a while. And if the enemy team is contesting point, then have the diva drop down to help. And if the widow gets pressured after the diva drops down to help, then I would have the widow drop down to the supports and have her get helped out with that. And then just yeah.
That's another thing to really keep in mind, especially as a defender or even as an attacker too. Over prioritizing the payload can be your demise. The concept of dropping down, I think it's a little distorted. Like you don't actually need your entire team to drop down. Actually, dropping down a lot of the time is basically giving away your advantage. If it was up to me, your whole team would just stay up top the whole time, and hopefully you have heroes that can capitalize from that range. And like Shock said, you only need one person to really be contesting the card. That can be a Winston that kind of gets in and out, harasses the Reinhardt for a little bit, or the Brigitte or whoever is trying to push the card at the moment jumps out. You can have him use Primal Rage if you really need people to get off of the card. But this whole time, ideally, you will have your team just putting an insane amount of pressure to the enemy team, who I'm assuming is not capitalizing on your high ground, and that's why you're still there. If the enemy team, the attacking team, was forcing you off of the high ground where you have to fall down, then I would guess you would try to go to the very end of the point to get that last little bit of high ground, the one that connects basically to point B of the map, and try to post up in there.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that we didn't mention is we keep alluding to high ground and all that stuff. There are comps that can play for the payload in this map, and we've seen them before, like the pirate ship comps, right? Like people that play Orisa with a Bastion, maybe like a Hanzo and a Roadhog. Those are heroes that don't have a lot of vertical mobility, but you trade that off for just being really, really steady and have a lot of firepower on the card, basically forcing the enemy team to have to come contest you, and hopefully you just have tools to be able to endure the dive or,
Definitely
the
not as
pain.
popular, but it is a consideration for payload maps in general.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the one thing I will say about that comp on this map specifically is actually like it's the downside that normal deathball comps or people who just like to like group up on the cart on this map face as well, is that as soon as you're coming out of the tunnel, the Bastion doesn't really have much defense anymore
Mm-hmm.
because like the
Right.
shield isn't going to cover him anymore. You
Yeah.
have to have like someone body blocking for him basically, for this to work even slightly well. But there's just like so many angles that like a disciplined team would attack the Bastion as soon as they come out of tunnel. Because like a disciplined team would see pirate ship coming out of the enemy spawn, and they might try to take an early fight. And if that fails, the payload isn't going to get far enough for them to worry about it anyways. So they'll be back, and as soon as that Bastion comes out of the tunnel, they will all attack from separate angles and just demolish the Bastion. So that's kind of
They don't even have to commit the CC abilities either, because you're just in this zone where you have all of these different approaches, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, it's another way of capitalizing on the high ground of this map. You can actually see a great example of this in a World Cup game that you can watch with a World Cup viewer. If you go watch China versus South Korea, Gibraltar is like the first map where China basically almost comes back and is like, okay, we might actually win a map.
Super close.
And on their last attempt, they attempt the pirate ship strategy, but South Korea being the great team that they are, they do exactly that. They actually just hide. They don't even contest at all. They just let him free
Just
push
wait.
the card until they start coming out of the tunnel. And the second they start coming out of that tunnel is like an avalanche. Just bah! Everyone just falls on the Bastion and a nade, all the abilities.
Everything.
And he's just
Yeah.
erased. And they win that fight pretty handily. So I definitely agree with you, Shock.
Anything else you want to wrap up on point A here before we move on to point B and the second high ground that is the spaceship here?
I do have one last thing to add to this point, and this applies actually to all of the points, but it's especially true in this one, and actually it's true in all of them. But once you have won as an attacker, once you have won the fight, especially on the tunnel, and you maybe wipe the whole enemy team, please, 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 don't just sit on the cart. The amount of times that I see just like a full team of 6 people win the fight and just sit around the cart and look at each other, emote maybe a little bit. Diana's
Googly
like
eyes at each other.
scratching her head, just like chilling. It's like, no, this is when you have to capitalize. This is when you have to take control of the map. Now that they're not there, you need to position yourselves so that if they try to come back and contest the payload, you can punish them very quick. The amount of times that I just see like the Winston and the Diva just like hanging out, chilling the card, moving slowly. Well, there's like a Zarya by herself, just on the other side of the wall that they could go in and just like push and kill before the whole team regroups. It's insane. And like the amount of times that I see teams lose this point and have to regroup, get the high ground again, try to wipe him again is insane because they don't do this.
Indeed. And that actually goes into like a perfect segue for a second point. Is there's a huge opportunity for staggers as soon as the attacking team takes first point, because there are 2 spawn doors that also are very tunnely and are like from low ground to high grounds. And a lot of the time, defenders will get caught spawning there, and it'll only be like 1, 2, or 3 people a lot of the time. And if you get your team to push up to those spawn doors right away, then you can get kills on them. And then after you get an advantage, you can get people up to the spaceship instantly. I feel like second point especially is like whoever controls the top spaceship is like the winner. Like you want to have as many people up there as possible while you have like you usually have like your supports on there. Like if you're running on a Lucio, which is pretty popular right now, you generally have those guys on cart, and then you have like everyone else that can get on the spaceship. You have them on the spaceship, and if someone needs support, then maybe the Diva or the Winston will drop down. But you want to have as many people on the spaceship as possible because it's like a massive high ground, and you can basically take control of the entire map from there. You can get huge angles on the defender's catwalk on the left side and the way back, from attacker's perspective. And you can also get access to the mini room that's right under the top of the spaceship, inside the spaceship. And then there's also a mega on the right of the spaceship.
It's in the stairwell.
In a little room, the stairwell, yeah.
Yeah. That's a great way to approach it too, because a lot of people, I wouldn't say a lot of people, I would say like if you're trying to parse a map in your brain, especially on an audio centric podcast without visuals, or even just trying to like play the game, you need to think of the objective and then the central side objective, which is the high ground, right? And so you basically need to say the payload is your main consideration and your main objective. But the other main objective by which you can take advantage of winning the game, aka moving the objective or capturing it, is by considering what your centerpiece is of the point. And the centerpiece is always where is the best high ground. And so on Gibraltar in this way, the reason is not even is a little bit different than just controlling it. It's more of like making sure that the enemy doesn't get a chance to approach you from there. So basically you constantly are hitting people from it and going up and resetting, and hitting them from it and going up and resetting. You do this over and over and over again. And it's really, really easy with mobility heroes. But there's something interesting that I found, not a lot of players that I talked to realize, but literally every hero in the game can get up there. Every single hero can get up there. It just takes a little bit longer.
Some faster than others, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, Shock, why don't we tell everyone how you get up there if you can kind of remember like the little process for the most basic. Let's just use Zenyatta as a basic thing because he's notorious for being the most immobile hero. So,
So there's actually like something I was watching like a Jane video on this of a Reinhardt getting up on top of the spaceship, and so what you can do is you can go from the payload, you can go up the stairwell to the mega health back room, and then you can go through the spaceship, and then there's like a blue and an orange
It's
box.
a
I don't
pile of
remember.
boxes, yeah, that
Yeah,
are like right
it's
next to
either
the
on the
spaceship.
it's on the defender side, right? I don't.
Yeah, it's on
Yes.
the defender side that
Defender
you can go
spawn
up.
door, right?
Okay.
It's the one where they're coming
Okay,
through.
it's closer to the defender side, and you can just jump on those boxes and then just jump right onto the spaceship. And I actually, like Jane was describing, a Reinhardt doing this, and that would be kind of how you would run like a deathfall composition on this map. And just like go on the go on the spaceship anyways, because like it's just so important.
Which would be terrible anyways. It would take so long to get up there. And then the second you want to engage, you have
But
to
like
drop.
then again, if you have like an advantage and you have time to get up there, then it's like I
That's
guess it's
true.
pretty pog. But
You could do a
Yeah.
10,000-foot parachute drop earth shatter, just like, I'm calling in the airstrike.
and that's not saying that that's an ideal comp on here, but if your team is running like Ryan Zari on this map for whatever reason, you can like suggest them doing that if you have the time to do that, because it is better than sitting on the cart.
Right. It
Yeah.
is. It is.
Yeah.
And you mentioned something, Rob, that I really want to highlight. You mentioned, the payload being your primary objective, getting the high ground on the map being like your secondary objective. I want to go like a step further. I almost want to flip it backwards. I think that winning the map, getting the high ground should be your primary objective almost at all times. And the actual objective, I mean, you should always keep it in mind, but it should be a secondary thought to winning the map. Because if you win the map, you basically win the objective too. The longer that you can do this, the easier it is to carry the payload. And like Chuck has said, only having one person in the payload is really enough. If your team has done a great job of once you capture point one. Sorry, what are you going to say?
Oh, sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say, like, a lot of the times moving the cart happens between fights rather than during them. And that's why people are taking advantage of the high ground. And I kind of just wanted to qualify the statement that you're saying. We all agree that this is important, but we got to know why. The why
Absolutely.
is because you move the cart between fights.
And there are points where the enemy team will give you free cart, right? And you have to be able to recognize these points. Like, they're not trying to contest you sometimes. They're maybe trying to position. They're waiting for you to turn around the corner or something. So they're not really contesting you. And easy to push the cart at that point. But once the fight breaks loose, you need to be in the right position to have the advantage. And Gibraltar, like, especially in point 1 and 2, the win condition of that map is control the high ground. Especially in point 2, whoever controls that shuttle in the middle has just the biggest advantage in the world. They can see the entire point from up there, and they're so hard to shoot because for the attackers who are looking up there, or defenders if they have lost the high ground, they only see the tiny little heads that are just shooting at them, throwing at them a bunch of stuff, putting a bunch of pressure. You get Hanzos and Widowmakers looking for picks. And as soon as they get that advantage, as soon as 2 or 3 people die from your team, now they can actually contest the point, come down, get rid of the rest, stop the entire push right there, and rinse and repeat, basically.
All right, Shock, let's talk a little bit more about Defender's point of view here, because we did talk about this kind of as a neutral position, right?
Yeah. Okay. So from the defender's perspective, it's kind of the inverse goal. So, okay. So starting from the beginning, the stagger spawns. Your team is inevitably going to likely get 1 or 2 staggers, and for the most part, there's not much you can do to prevent this. But a lot of people do forget that there are 2 spawn doors. There's one that is on the right side of the defender's perspective, which is where most people go. But there's actually like a little bit of a longer route to the left side, and that spot actually it opens up right next to the stairwell for the mega room, and you can go up there, and that tends to be a little bit safer than the other spawn door if the enemy team is staggering you.
Much safer, actually, because you come out to cover from the right door. You come out into like open ground where they literally can see you from the payload. From the other side, you come out behind the pile of boxes so they don't have like a direct line of sight with you either.
Yeah, indeed. So yeah, so at the start of that, if you do that successfully and it actually works, then you're not getting staggered, and that's huge because then what you can do from there is you can take the high ground right away before the attackers even have a chance to get there. You can get your Winston, your Diva, maybe even your Ryan Zarya, as I alluded to earlier,
Whatever you got, just get him
Mhm.
up there.
up to the spaceship and just take it right away, so that the attackers team has a little bit of a harder time getting up there. And
Mhm.
I cannot tell you how many times my team has gotten full held because a Widowmaker, a Winston, and a Diva have gotten up onto the spaceship on defenders and just like sniped through all four doors, like the bottom
They
two
just don't
doors
let
and
you
the
in.
top two doors, and they do not let you in, and you have to be so disciplined to get your team like through there without someone getting sniped, because if person gets sniped, like the fight's basically over entirely because of like how the spawns work on this map. And like it's just insane. It's really difficult to get the Widowmaker off of there as soon as she has like tanks positioned on there and she has the
Mhm.
support she needs.
A lot of teams get actually full held on this point as well, especially attacking teams that get wiped right after they win first point, and then those giant doors shut down. So basically, the only entrance are like the four tiny
Yeah, the
doors on the
four tiny
corners.
doors.
Yeah, those four tiny doors are the doors of death. Because like Shock said, as long as you have the defender team being disciplined and like paying attention to those doors and just spamming the hell out of it, guarding them with their tanks, is really, really hard to get through them without losing somebody, especially if the enemy team has a good sniper or good DPS. So as an attacker, I think that is super, super important to capitalize. The second you win point one, you cannot be passive in this map. Like Shock said, you have
Mhm.
to take advantage of those huge doors are open. You can just try to kill any people that get staggered, and then you have to rush to get control of the
Mhm.
spaceship yourself so that the enemy team can't like turn that against you. I think that's the easiest way to, get the payload
Mhm.
to the very end here, but it's not always the case that you can do it.
Now, Shock, can you talk a little bit more about just like how people utilize the high ground for like flank routes or even just other areas in the map? Because I remember a lot of games on Gibraltar because this is one of the oldest maps we have to play. And all I can remember is having PTSD from like Beyblade meta, where you have these Reapers like come from defender spawn or even from attacker spawn, and the teams are in like gold or platinum or silver or bronze, and there's no one that can hit shots on Widow. So you literally can just teleport to the ship, hit the Beyblade, drop from the sky, and the Beyblade is just him spinning around and doing Death Blossom. It's not even like getting empowered. He just drops down and kills everyone and does it over and over again.
Yeah. Well, I know as a Genji slash Hanzo player on this map, I'm usually like I'm on the spaceship as much as possible, and
Mm,
especially as a Genji because I have the dash to get up really fast. With Hanzo, it's a little bit more difficult. You have to find some places where you can wall climb, and a lot of the time it's blocked by platforms. But as Genji, you can often like wait for your tanks to make a little bit of a play and make some space, and then you can drop down from spaceship and you get like a perfect view. Like when you're up there, you can literally see like everything. Like you
Everything.
can see you can see where the supports are exactly, even if they're hiding behind stuff, and you can see like exactly how you want to take this fight. And as soon as you see your tank make a play, you see exactly where that support is going, and you can like make a proactive play. I'm throwing shurikens where I know for a fact he's going to go because they're getting pushed back, and I see that, and I just see everything that the enemy team is doing and how to approach the fight, and I
it's like
feel
you have a free top-down view, which is
yeah.
very
Yeah,
rare in this game.
basically, you have a
And then
top-down
from
view of the
there,
map, so there's no cover, like you said. As a sniper, is the same. There's no hiding from you
yeah,
behind boxes. You see them from above.
yeah. You can also go from the mega room. There's a platform that goes to the spaceship, but you can also take it and go to the high ground and closer to the attacker spawn, and that's a good flank route. You can also I also like to take that as Hanzo sometimes when I see that my team is making a play and I know it's a good idea to make a flank there. I can take a separate angle and maybe if they're running Rein Zarya, because sometimes people run Rein Zarya on second point just because they're getting like held at the doors and they need something to block sniper shots for a little bit. Then you take a separate angle as Hanzo and yeah.
All right, we're running a little short on time, and if we want to try to get to our third thing here, but let's wrap up some things with point C and talk us through this final phase, because this is really where the game makes a major shift. So let's talk about point C.
Yeah, so point C, I even see a lot of composition changes on this point sometimes. Like I often see Rein Zarya on attack. It's not seen much in like pro play, but it is definitely seen much on ladder. I think that's just because like the high ground on this map is important, but it's generally only important for the DPS on this map, I would say. And the more important thing is getting as much people on cart as possible, just so that you can get the payload to move faster, because they're going to have like the defenders at this point are going to have a massive spawn advantage, and you want to have like pressure on the point at this point to try to like just get it past as fast as possible and like get anyone who's on there off. But there are some important high grounds on this map, and I have seen Widows dominate a lot on this point especially. This is probably the best attacker's Widow's point, because you can just sit on the back high ground as soon as you get around the corner with the payload. And the only thing that the defender's team can do to contest you is for their Winston or Diva to come close enough to dive you, or they have an enemy Widowmaker as well. And on defense on this map, it's really hard to position a Widowmaker. So it's really hard to get the Widowmaker off from that, because you basically have to have tanks that can jump there, and it's a really high spot and far away from the defender's point, hard to get to.
Yeah,
and as soon as the payload gets under like the catwalk, it's like your tanks are going to be like there. So their tanks have to push past your tanks, and like there's no way for them. Like you have to have like a Genji on the defender's point, like go on like a massive flank, go through like the mini room, through the like the building.
It's just nuts.
Yeah, I will position Widow in this last part of the map is really, really good on attack, because it's like two big shooting ranges. When you first get the payload passed from points B to C, there's like a huge open space that you can actually get it like in the lower or in the high ground in the very end, and like see everything from there with no obstacles or anything. And then like Shock said, at the very last stage of the map is like an L, which is just another long shooting range with no real places to really hide, and then your whole team is in front of you, so you're usually safe as Widow in the back.
Now, can you talk about some more like off-kilter, like fun comps that you can kind of run here to just do mix-ups? I know recently I ran like a triple tank on offense, and they responded with a triple tank on defense, and it actually worked for them in their favor. And then they swapped to quad tanks, and we just couldn't punch through. But running like 3 dive tanks and including a Hammond for just zoning was really, really good for when we ran it around that last corner, you know, to kind of position your Widowmaker in the back, or position kind of like a soldier, or even just a McCree. It sounds kind of odd to run it with dive tanks, but kind of just giving them a little bit more room with a Hammond is really helpful.
Yeah. Well, I know you're suggesting fun comps, but I have seen like goats ran on this point.
Interesting.
Just because of how I described like it earlier with how like the high ground might not necessarily be as taken advantage of on this point, just because I feel like on defender side it's a really awkward angle for the the catwalk is the main high ground for the defender's point. And that just like it's good for a defender, maybe like a McCree, but like how are you gonna get a McCree up there is like the real question. And like and because it's like I don't know how to I think it's just because of the defenders like spawn advantage. I think having goats there just really like helps get everyone off the point, because as I alluded to earlier with the uh it's basically just the spot advantage. Like you want to get everyone off cart as much as possible, so they have less of a chance to contest and stall out.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
can
you don't want them
see.
to be cycling that point. It gets super easy for the defenders to keep cycling, like you were saying there. It's
Yeah.
really annoying.
Right. That's the one thing you really have to keep in mind as the attacker. At the very end, it almost becomes like a 2CP style, where like you have the defenders with a really short spawn just coming in and contesting. They can stall the card for a really long time if they need to. You have to keep this in mind. And at that point, it's all about focus fire. You cannot take long killing them. Like, if a
Yeah.
tracer lives for too long or a Mei lives for too long, it buys them enough time for all of them to come back and maybe get get you off of the card. That's like the hardest point of this map. Nothing is won until everyone is off the card. So even like goats, a composition that can just stand around it and spam damage, so nobody can get near it, can work pretty well. You just have to really keep
Even
that in
just
mind.
zoning stuff too is also really interesting. I've seen people, because of like what Shock said, because Widowmaker is such a difficult pick in the final round unless you station her all the way back on basically like setting her up on the spaceship shuttle that's taking off. There's like a very small high ground there that if you're just trying to shooting gallery the enemy Widow, that's a really good spot because you can kind of zone a couple spots there. But when I was running defense, I'm not saying this is a best thing, but like you can just literally run Pharah on offense because of how free it is to move around without a Widow contesting you. And in doing so, you can literally just run a Mercy here and just damage boost things and try to find people that stick out, get that advantage of like a 5v6 or a 4v6 and get your numbers and then just go. Like everyone just goes. You can run goats with a Pharah Mercy. You can run goats with just a Pharah. You can run like a full CC comp. Like I'm talking like Diva, Pharah, Lucio, Hammond, and like just anything that has some form of knockback. Even a Roadhog is fine here, but you really can't run a Roadhog very easily around certain things because of just how open he is to getting shot. So you do have to play a little safer than normal, but this whole point is basically like take the considerations of A and B and throw them out the window because now you're playing a different game. Like that's the biggest thing that I think players need to really realize once you get to point C on offense and on defense. It has to be a mentality shift.
Yeah, I actually pharmacy is pretty decent at this point too. Normally, I wouldn't like pharmacy in such an open map like the point B or point C,
Less so on
but
defense for sure, but yeah.
yeah, but the fact that point C has that middle high ground, basically where Farah can like kite in and out, it actually makes it
The
not
big
not
building.
as yeah, that big building where you can there's like a separator basically that separates like the defenders from like the other side, and you can like hop in and out with Farah and just keep spamming and have a safe zone there where you still have a vantage point. So it's just actually not that bad on point C.
So Shock, what do you like to play on this map, especially on from like defender's point of view, as we're kind of shifting into defending here at this point now?
So usually on Defender C, you also see a shift. You see a shift to Ryan Zarya, usually just to counter their Ryan Zarya, because like you generally want to have the shield because they're trying to get you off cart, so you want to have a good hold on the cart as well. So just taking a Ryan Zarya, trying to hold. There's also there's some good spots to spam out grabs with Zarya, especially. There's a couple doors, um and you also really want to have a mid to long range DPS that can take advantage of the far high ground, the high ground that's closest to the attacker spawn, that has the mega health pack right on the bottom of it, just so that you can have like a separate angle. But you do want to be careful if you're only running deathball tanks there, because you have to know when to drop when you're getting pressured too much, and you have to make sure that your tanks are there to support you when you do drop. But it's a really good angle that you can take to maybe counter Ryan Zarya if they have that. So
I found that it's from a support point of view for defense that Ana and Zenyatta have been very, very good for me, just historically as a consideration because, like you said, that long sight line. Maybe you don't run a Ryan, maybe you run a Risa, and you kind of just park next to her and keep discording everything she's shooting. For the chance that you do break the Ryan barrier, you can win that battle. You can run the Ana so that you can shoot that high ground, like you're saying. You put your DPS over there for that separate angle. You have that quick outlet. You don't have to commit a Mercy all the way over there.
Yeah.
It's quite nice. But yeah, I definitely like the approach there. What do you think about running more of a mobility defense here? I know that's not something that we said is very conventional, but can be utilized as they kind of push closer in while you're trying to stall, right? Because you do have that stalling mentality. Once they start getting close, you're just trying to eat away the clock.
Yeah, so if you're running like a more mobility comp, maybe like a Winston Diva, Genji Tracer, maybe even Genji Doomfist, uh, Luciana sort of thing, you basically just play it like all of the other points. You want to be taking the high ground. You want to be making sure your team can have sight lines that give them an advantage. And as soon as the cart gets to a point where you don't want it to go anymore, then you have maybe your Diva drop down, and then if you need more, then you have your Winston drop down, and then you make an attempt to dive their backline and take them out from the back, while trying to keep the cart from going, and then just reset back to the high ground after that.
Yeah, I think that's very important to keep in mind. If you are running a more dive comp, more mobile centric, it's important that you don't prioritize the front line at that point, especially if they're running a Ryan Zarya. You're not gonna win that battle. You really have to use the high ground to just get those picks and back. Usually, their Ana or Zenyatta or Mercy are gonna be a little bit exposed in this map. There's not like a lot of places that they can hide from, and especially if you have the high ground, they can be easily spotted. But it's also something that you should keep in mind. Unlike other points like point A and point B, characters like Doomfist are a little bit more exposed as well. Have you had any trouble in this last point with Doomfist? Maybe I feel like he's easier to spot of like where he's coming
Yeah,
from in this
yeah,
last one.
it can be it can be more difficult to run Doomfist on this point, but if you're hiding on at least on the defender side, if you're hiding on the mega high ground, like the high ground with the mega on the bottom that I alluded to earlier, it's good to set up seismics from there, I feel like. But if you're like anywhere else on the map, it tends to not work as well, just because you can get spammed down from a lot of different angles because the map is so open.
Sure.
So it's just really important, if you are running Doomfist on that point, to be taking high ground where you can't be shot from a lot of different angles. And I think that's a lot of the advantage of high ground in general, is that the enemy team has less angles to shoot at you unless they come up to get you. And that just really plays a lot in Doomfist's favor. You can wait for your tanks to engage, and then you can get quick picks and reset back.
So, kind of to wrap things up on the map a bit more, Shock, you said at the very outset of this episode when we were planning that you're like, let's do this one because it's like one of my favorite maps. So why is that, and what about the map really kind of clicks with you, and why is this? I mean, you mentioned a little bit about being a Hanzo guy and it really helping you out.
Yeah, I just really like this. I feel like I really like this map because I've always like really enjoyed playing snipers. Like, even like when I was just like a Widow player, more of a hit scan, I really like this map because there's a lot of different sight lines. And I also just feel like this is one of the most diverse maps in the game. And it's weird because like it's a dive map, but you can run like so many different DPS dive heroes in this map. Like, you can run double sniper, like when that was a thing. You can run Tracer, Genji. You can run Doomfist. You can run. I've even, like, when Doomfist wasn't my thing, I've ran Reaper on first point Gibraltar, and just dropped down on the tunnel and just taken advantage of that. There's just so many different like damage heroes you can play on this map, and as a DPS, I have a really flexible DPS pool, and I just love being able to like explore all these different hero options.
And now Ash throws another wrench in the system, right? You have another consideration.
She's actually pretty good at this map too.
By the way, folks, as we transition into our last little section here, Ash is available and competitive as of this week. So get out there and make sure your bobs are doing something. So we got a lot of feedback on our last episode, which was the one that, if you guys are listening to the backlog, we had recently a big surge of the state of Overwatch videos and the problem with Brig and the problem with Doomfist is kind of like the big hot button issues. And wow, I've never really seen our community get so involved in Twitter and emails and just conversations in the Discord kind of just exploding. We just have lots of people talking, and not just our community. I'm talking like the greater Overwatch community is all talking about this right now. And we had some interesting points, and I wanted to run these by Shock because we had actually been talking a little bit in the pre-show about this exact thing. And we're basically trying to pick each other's brain as to how do we want to approach this. And so let's just read it here. So kind of like summarizing an email that we got from member Bradley, who actually accidentally emailed Omnic Meta instead of Omnic Lab, which I thought was hysterical, and Switchfoot was kind enough to forward this to us. But basically was saying that he wanted to chime in and say it's important for everyone to worry about the statistics and actually the analysis of a problem in the game and not just addressing it at the highest level, and saying that Brigitte has like these crazy amounts of counters and something that he underlined here. And again, this is a really long email and we have a couple other things to go here, so that's why I'm not going through this. But basically just saying all the talk is him or Brigitte being oppressive and does not feel good for players who push to the higher skill ceiling as a disingenuous argument for two reasons, being a hard counter for small number of heroes and same number of hard counters for herself. And then we also had the people talking about how, you know, the game is catered and guides are catered for upper level play, and it's kind of like the whole transition. So it's kind of like this whole can of worms of people talking about game balance and creating things to help teach players is very much this upper echelon top 500 masters, diamond, grandmasters players is kind of like where people are kind of like helping you get the advanced guides and not really helping where the majority of the player base is. So I've opened the can of worms. You guys can talk about it.
Well, to kind of like set the stage a little bit, the discussion that we had last episode was about a lot of the videos that have been popping up about the stage of Overwatch, the state of competitive, some balance changes. We've had a lot of pros come out and talk about maybe they're not completely satisfied with what the game is right now, and they're offering a lot of their input. How do they think the game could be improved? And we talked about it last episode on the show. And one of the conclusions that I came up with, and I say I because this is my personal thought conclusion. This is not what Blizzard thinks. This is not how the game direction is gonna go. This is just how I personally think the game could be improved in my eyes. And I said that I want to give more agency to high skilled players to be able to, you know, play at their highest level and don't have heroes that maybe don't require the same amount of performance to counter them. And we did get a couple of emails. The one that you mentioned that was sent to Omnic Meta and got forwarded to us says that he doesn't really agree with this argument because Brigitte only counters a very small number of heroes, and she also has hard counters against herself. Also, he says that a lot of pro players conveniently ignore a lot of facts just because they want to play Genji Tracer. They don't want to be countered by Brigitte. And he says that Brigitte is a great tool for lower skilled players to be able to still hang in the game and not feel like completely useless against like a super high level Tracer, which to a certain point, I agree. There was a point where Tracers were just running rampant and sometimes they were just incredibly hard to counter. But, you know, I have my thoughts about that. I mentioned them before last episode. They're still the same. But what do you think, Chuck?
Just about like the this like Brig and her skill.
Kind of
Not-
like the whole
not-
thing, the whole topic, whatever you want to touch on here.
Not only Brig. Brig is just, I think, the most exaggerated example of the fact, but maybe having heroes that can
Okay.
easily hard counter other heroes.
Well, I will say one thing. As like a Doomfist player myself, I pretty much specialized in him last season, and I'm kind of doing that this season too, but to a lesser extent. I feel like he's getting a lot of flack in general, just because he has like one-shot abilities that a lot of people think are just like unfair.
Unfair, yeah.
And I have like my own like giant opinion about one-shots. Like I talked about this on stream a little bit on Tuesday. I was talking about how I don't really like Widow, and I don't like Widow because like she can get one shots, but she can get one shots from across the map, from like anywhere in the entire map. I just have a little bit of a problem with that, but I also think that one shots are good for the game because what they do is they punish players, and by punishing players for getting in positions that are not good and they shouldn't be in, then you're actively making the player base better. So I feel like Doomfist actually helps in that respect. Like, you can play around Doomfist by taking cover. You can play around Doomfist by having your tank, your Zarya, save a bubble for you when you get dove, which is actually something that I've been actively doing in my climb. I've just been playing Zarya and saving bubbles for when supports get dove. Like, it's a good strategy. And I feel like the argument for pros wanting to play Tracer and Genji actually applies here. I feel like a lot of pros don't like Doomfist because, one, he has one shots and he's perceived as a lower skill hero, and he's also and they want to play Tracer and Genji instead of him. But I also think that's more of a Brig argument because Brig counters Genji and Tracer more than she counters Doomfist. But yeah, that's.
I heard something that I'll weigh in here is not my personal opinion. It's something that I heard Chipsa reacting to the changes with regards to Doomfist adjustments, and saying that the hero just feels really, really bad because they rebalanced the two abilities that felt the most fair to die to, which was the seismic slam and the uppercut, which, like Shock said, they're one-shot type things, but you do have moments in between where it's not a one-hit kill, right? You get slammed, you get hit up in the air, you get shot. That whole sequence has frames where there's counterplay, even though you can't really control it 1v1, but as a team, you can counter this type of thing. And then Chipsa was saying that on the flip side, the one thing that didn't get any adjustments whatsoever was the rocket punch, and that's the only one-shot thing in the kit besides the ultimate. And now the ultimate just doesn't do anything at all. He's like, this should be a strong ability. And what is the strong ability? The one that I have a 4-second cooldown on? That makes sense. So it's kind of like these really weird things that he was saying. He's like, I'm not sure what to do with this. He's like, I'm just going to use this ult to like peace out or wait until my team decides to run a Zarya grab and use every other one of my ults on that. So you have like these other things that are popping up in the game. And then another thing that I think was a big problem with how people were adjusting this, and I'd actually want to hear, Shock, you can weigh in on this specific response with regards to Brigitte. A lot of players were getting upset at Brigitte and communicating in such a way, and this happens at upper level tier, communicating this to everyone, and also lower level tier getting upset at upper level tier, basically for communicating that Brig is too strong because of X. And it's really, really linear thinking and not necessarily like disingenuous, but I feel like it's just a poor communication issue with a lot of players on both sides of the argument of saying that Brig is bad, or Brig is busted because she can one-shot, or Brig is busted because she has armor, or Brig is busted because X. And it's usually like this super narrow focus of an entire hero's capabilities with regards to one thing. You know what I mean? It's kind of like the oversimplification of game balancing around one hero and saying, this is why the game is bad, blame X. It's like there's a whole plethora of other things going on. And that's why when you see patch notes, when people are upset, that's like they just swath a bunch of stuff. You know what I mean? So, Shock, what do you think about this? Because I really wanted to pick your brain on this. And we've talked about this kind of like in the Discord, but I want to bring this to the forefront.
So Brig, I feel like the problem with Brig, I feel, is like a combination of things. So she has a stun on a 7-second cooldown. She has a barrier with 500, 400 HP. It's 500 now because it got nerfed from 600.
Yeah, from 600. Yep.
She is a support. She's the only support with 250 health, and 50 of it is armor. So that makes it harder to kill. Makes her harder to kill with spread weapons. She has. She is also the only hero, sort of, that can overheal. So, and I think the overheal is actually the main thing. So like, her armor pack is 150 burst healing, but any healing up to 75 that is over it will turn into armor. And there is actually like a lot of talk from pros about this, about how like overheal in Overwatch, if it were to exist, would have to like only last like 1 second. Like it would have to be like an instant thing, like a Zarya bubble sort of thing. Like and that's exactly
2
what
seconds.
Zarya bubble does. Like Zarya bubble is a overheal basically. It's a block just for 2 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it would be helpful if Brig got that sort of treatment. But it's also just a combination of her ability to stun. And I don't ever think that her one-shotting Tracer combo was ever like actually a problem, because like if you stun Tracer, she's probably gonna die anyways. So like if McCree flashbangs Tracer, even if he misses the shot, if the team's there, then the Tracer's probably gonna die. Like I don't think the one-shot combo was ever.
Well, she's healing during the whole time.
But yeah, but I feel like her armor pack is the main problem, and I think she should be like, I don't know. Maybe we could they could increase the healing that it actually does, but also not have it, or have the armor last not as long, because
Also, not to mention it stacks with rally, which is also a huge issue.
Yeah. And then the other thing is just her barrier. It makes like she already has like armor, and I think that is like insane, but she has this 500 HP barrier that she can like recharge pretty easily, and I feel like that makes her like so incredibly difficult to kill from a DPS perspective, and I don't feel like a support should be that tanky. I think they should lower the HP of the shield and maybe increase her aura healing a little bit again.
There's just so many different things at play,
There's
right?
a lot of
like that's
things,
the problem.
Yeah, and going back to like some of the arguments too, a lot of people were saying we don't want Brigitte to get nerfed because we think that she's a good counter and she's healthy having an option, a rock, paper, scissor option. And what I would like would be just to go back a little bit to more of like the soft rock, paper, scissor. One of the examples that I was having in a Twitter conversation is Genji has always had Winston as an enemy, right? Like as a Genji, you hate Winston's, but he doesn't completely shut you down at every point, right? If like the Winston
He
is
doesn't
really
turn Genji off.
right, if the
Like, it's not
Winston
an
is
on-off
really
switch.
good, then he can be really oppressive and really get in your way so that you can't do much, and you might have to end up switching. But for the most part, as long as you're a decent Genji, you can do a lot to avoid Winstons and get around them, and his abilities
Sure.
don't completely neglect everything you do. But Brigitte, on the other hand, it's a huge counter to heroes like Tracer, like Genji, or any hero that is trying to like kind of like that do that dive thing and get out. Even for Doomfist too, because she counters them in every sense of the word. Right? If you get too close to her, she might insta kill you. If you avoid her and don't get close to her, you can't really damage her very much with these heroes because of the shield and the high amount of armor that she already has. If you choose to then focus somebody else, like their Ana or any other squishy that is around them, it's incredibly hard to get a pick on them because she has one ability that even if you get close to killing them, she can just top him off and give him armor. So even if after they get fully healed, you're able to maybe land a couple more shots, usually the armor is enough that you don't have enough time before you get killed or punished, or
It's
you
the
have
same
to get
argument
out of
when we
there.
were talking about Mercy. Like back when Mercy was busted, it's the same thing. Like there's always something that's going to take the fall for something feeling unfair.
And
You know what I
now,
mean?
and now a lot of people say, well, if that's the case, then just switch and don't play those heroes, and that would be okay. Except that the best way to counter a Brigitte is usually to bring your own
Also
Brigitte.
run one. Yeah.
And now the most popular thing is goats because Brigitte is so strong in enabling a comp like that one, that it has become a lot of like goats
Yeah.
versus goats, especially at the higher levels of play. You actually don't see a lot of goats in the lower tiers. You sometimes encounter it here and there, but for the most part, this is more of a higher tier thing. So it's not like the pros are unwilling to switch. They they have figured out the counters, and it turns out it's another Brigitte.
Now there's also something else that was really interesting to me, which was their very first change that I thought was like pretty decent, like an experimental stage rather than like rebalancing, if that makes sense, where they just made the shield bash like not go through barriers. You know, they like add this extra like check, and they're like, well, let's just take away like one part of this. I really thought that was a good solution. And then they like go back through and they start adding all of these other things. And I'm like, no, 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 no. We're like taking one step forward and two steps back. You know what I mean? Like the damage wasn't the issue. I can see how it can be an issue when you're hitting a bunch of tanks all at once and the bash hits the main one and stuns them. But if it's not hitting the main tank unless you're going on these crazy flanks to get behind the barrier, it's no longer an issue. So anyways, I don't want to like beat this with a horse, and Shock, I kind of want you to have the final word on this, but like, what do you think about this just in general? It doesn't have to be Brigitte. It could just be like balance changes and like trying to like approach the situation. We do have Ashe kind of coming in, and not that she's like any this meta buster per se, but it's really hard to predict meta when you have all of these crazy changes thrown in. We're not really sure what's next.
Yeah, I will say one more thing. I do want Brigitte to be good in this game. I just don't want her to be like, obviously everyone wants her to be changed somewhat. But I think that goats in general is good for the game in like a little bit, but like not like as a meta definer, but just as an option, because of like what I said earlier about how I think Widowmaker is like really, really strong and really oppressive. The reason why she doesn't feel as oppressive right now is because of goats specifically. And I also think that goats, especially in the higher tiers of play, is shielding Ashe looking really overpowered right now because she also gets countered by goats, and I think that Ashe is a little bit overtuned with Mercy Boost, but obviously it's too early to say anything. But I think that goats is really good for the game, and I want Brig to be good enough for that comp to exist as an option. I just don't want it to be the option.
Right, and
Yeah,
that is
that's a good
something that
idea
is
to
definitely
put it.
worth mentioning. It's not like we're advocating over here, like get rid of Brigitte, get rid of goats. I think that having a 3 tank, 3 support comp is super awesome, and like in certain situations, it's clutch to bring that out and like to attain a certain purpose. And maybe catch your team off guard, keep them on their toes. It works well with certain maps, but it's getting a little bit out of hand. I think, like we've said before, just toning it down a little bit, and I think they've already addressing a lot of these things. Brigitte, her stun is going down. Is no longer dealing 50 damage, just 5. We also have Doomfist changes coming in. Genji apparently can now deflect Rocket Punch. I think that's a new addition to the PTR that we haven't talked about.
Whoa, weird.
What the heck?
I know.
Why?
And by deflect
But-
rocket punch, he means just not take any
Yeah,
damage,
I know.
right?
Yeah,
He
but
doesn't
that's
take
still
the
ridiculous
initial
to me.
damage, but I think if
But
he
he
gets
does get hit in
slammed
the
against
wall.
the wall, you still take the damage from that. You just don't take the damage
So it cuts
from
the
the
damage
fist.
by
Okay.
50.
So if you deflect, you just don't get one shot
So
like you
the-
used to, basically.
So the rocket punch doesn't stun reflect anymore. Is that what I'm hearing, or is it just that he doesn't take the damage and he still gets?
He doesn't take the damage and he
shot
gets pushed. He gets
registers
pushed
and you
back.
get pushed back.
It's just
Yeah.
like a boop, basically. You get pushed back, but you
if
can
you get
still
hit
hit a
into
wall.
the wall, I
That's
don't
weird,
think. I
man.
think that it does trigger the stun, and you do take the secondary damage.
I don't know
because
how much I like that.
I think it's more of a consistency thing with regards to the hitbox on a deflect, because you can get hit by deflect in the front, but it doesn't do anything. But then you get hit in the back, so Genji's behind the deflect, right? So the stun registers on the rear end of him. So that makes sense to me. But again, we're kind of like parsing like random things at the end of the show here.
Yeah. I
So,
mean, most of this
um,
comes down to there are changes coming to the game, and I think there's going to be a meta
Yeah.
shakeup with all these changes
Yeah.
coming, and we'll see where we end up with. I don't want to go to the only dive meta in every single map, but I don't want to
yeah.
only see goats versus goats and like the pro play. Like I said, you don't see it as much in lower tiers of play. But
Yeah.
that being said, I think there's a meta shakedown coming in. We'll see where we end up.
So last thing on the docket before we kind of close out here with some special thanks is that in any game that requires game balance, the game will not retain its urgency, will not retain its interest and entertainment value, especially with regards to esports and personal play, if the game isn't changing. And that doesn't just mean introducing new things. It also means adjusting existing things, whether it be maps, characters, modes, etc., 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 right? You need to introduce new factors and you need to change existing ones. And so if the game is not regularly hitting all of these things in the same cylinders, then there is reason why the communities are always upset. And again, it's also a very fairly common practice where things get overtuned and other things get undertuned just a little bit more than maybe they should, just so that people are like, hey, I should try this, and not whether or not something is balanced, because there's times where things have been overtuned and people don't play it, a la initial stages of Ana.
Or
Ana was
Zenyatta.
so freaking busted on beginning stages, and Zenyatta, like there was a time when Mei had the previous changes that was like actually broken, and now it's like in the game now, right? Like the no fall off damage on the icicle. It was way too powerful at the time. Now they put it in the game, it's totally fine. So, or well, I mean that might be a controversial opinion. I don't know, but for some of you out there, but just keep in mind, you got to
I think
keep
it's fine.
things changing. You got to keep things changing, and if it's not changing, it's not interesting. So even if you hate the changes of what Blizzard is doing right now, buckle up because they're coming again, and it's gonna make it way more interesting later on. So just keep that in mind as you're going through here. We do have a few more people to thank, and I'm just going to blast through these. We have a brand new patron this week, Rob W. Great name, by the way. Thanks for supporting the show, and really appreciate you guys on Patreon, especially those at the diamond level, at the top level, supporting the show, helping us keep the lights on, keep getting great guests, and also just keeping our funding for BlizzCon year after year is really, really difficult, and we really deeply appreciate these people. Top Score Solutions, Anthony E., Solo for PS4, Mr. Mars, Jan Jinkle, Terry F., Durandal, Roger B., Britmus, Shazir, Krista Playa, and Tragic Zach. Thank you guys so much for your support. We really appreciate it. Also, Tragic Zach for jumping in the chat. Another way you can join us and support us financially is by heading over to our stream. This time is again in the early morning. Sometimes the streams are going on and off, but you can support us on twitch.tv/OmnicLab with the affiliate program, and you can give us a sub there. That's going to do it for the show. If you want to find us, Google us. Google Omnic Lab, one word, and Google us Omnic Lab, two words, and it should pop up. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Patreon, and Twitch, as well as our YouTube page and our merch page and our website at omniclab.com. That's going to do it for us. Shock, where can people find you? I know that you're going to be pushing for that affiliate status in the next month. Hopefully before Christmas you can nail it down, but how can people find your Twitch stream?
Indeed. So my Twitch is twitch.tv/shockmasterow, and I will be streaming Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays for sure, usually around 1 to 5 p.m. Pacific time.
Okay.
And yeah.
You just did a VOD review stream yesterday, right?
Yep.
So keep that in mind. If you guys want somebody who's been playing the game at a high level for a minute, to just check out your VODs, he might be a good person to reach out to. And reviewing VODs or having your VOD review can be one of the best ways to improve. I actually did it myself recently. I was trying to get better at my Hanzo, and I sent over a video to one of my friends that I know is a really good Hanzo, and he gave me a few pointers, actually things that I hadn't even thought about, and it's made my game a lot better since then. So you should try it too. I will send you a VOD, Shock, so you can review my shitty
bot
Hanzo
VOD.
I'll
play.
be looking forward to it.
Andres versus bots. Andres, where can people find you?
If you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter at iPlayGames. You spell that IPLAI Games.
And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram with the tag NotRob. If you guys like Hearthstone, you can check out Velen's Chosen Podcast. And if you guys want to swap friend codes on the Switch, I am playing Let's Go Pikachu. And within the next week, I will have Smash, so I can play some Smash with y'all. And really looking forward to playing that game. My wife is beyond stoked. So we even bought GameCube controllers and converters and the whole 9 yards.
Nice.
So we'll see you guys next week. Remember, don't be a lab rat, be a scientist. Thanks again, Shock, for joining us. It's been a pleasure having one of our longest, I don't even know what to say, longest time veteran community members. I don't even know how many labels to give you and what ones to give you now.
Yeah, teammate, community member,
Team deathmatch extraordinaire. We'll end on that note. We'll see you guys next week. Have a good one.
I have nothing more to teach you.